Hey everyone, today we're going to see some practical tips and hacks to create a scene like this using 3D primitives in Clip Studio Paint. If you don't know the basics to manipulate 3D objects, please check the links below or in the YouTube cards. You can also use the timestamp in the video. So without further ado, let's begin. The first step is to customize your 3D workflow, so it is a good idea to create a workspace just for 3D primitives and objects. You can return to your regular workspace later. You need to identify the palettes and tools you will use most. The first one is the material folder with the primitive objects. But besides the regular palette, I like to use puppet palettes. This will hide once you click on the canvas, improving your workflow and saving time. 3D primitives can be manipulated with the arrows and sphere handles like other 3D objects. Now, a very important palette is the tool property when you use the object operation subtool. Here, you can see and change many of the options that will affect to the 3D primitives. Try to maximize its size as much as you can. You can use a puppet palette to save time from scrolling too much. You can also minimize and expand the section of the palette. To add a puppet palette to your quick access menu, right-click on an empty space and go to Puppet Palette. Select the one you want to add and click on Add. If you prefer, you can do the same in the command bar. To custom even more your tool property palette, click on the Grange icon and select what options are going to be visible with the eye next to the option. I personally like to see a snap to 3D rotation step, pivot point, and whole rotation. That way, I don't need to open the subtool detail palette every time I need to use one of these options. Also, I like to double check the snapping option from the palette and not just for the icon in the object manipulator. You can modify the height, width, and depth with the square handles, or change the object scale with the sphere with triangles. You can modify the number of division from the general primitive section and decide if you want to show or hide the wireframes. You can get a cylinder shape adding division to the x-axis of the prism. You can change the color from object color or from the color palette. Once you have customized the 3D primitive, you can save it as 3D material. Click on the sphere with a plus icon in the object launcher. Name the primitive, select a folder, and add tags to the material. You can repeat the process and create a library of custom 3D primitives to save time. You can also get different shapes, changing the division in other 3D primitives. You can add image to a plane. From 3D primitive texture, click on material and search the image you want to use. For example, a fire with transparency background. The alpha will change to semi-transparent. In this mode, you can control the opacity of the 3D plane. Uncheck Apply Light Source and Cast Shadows. And under General Primitive, select Follow Camera On. Now the 3D plane will always be shown at the front as looking to the camera. You can also apply the image material, dragging it from the folder material. Select Follow Camera, only horizontal, and try different camera presets to see how it works. Once you have found a good angle, you can duplicate the camera, unlock it, and use other camera to keep editing or trying new angles. You can add multiple cameras in a 3D layer. To create walls and columns, you can add textures from 3D Primitive Texture. Click on Material and select a texture. You can also apply a texture to multiple selected objects. From tiling, you can change the scale ratio of the texture to match the look between different objects. You can also manipulate the position of the tiling and uncheck Keep Aspect Ratio if you want to. Although this option can be useful when you resize, for example, a wall made from a cube and need to adjust the texture. To create an open or hollow primitive, go to 3D Primitive Texture and click on Export Map and save the map as a Clip Studio file. Open the map and select the background color. Delete or use a mask to hide the top and the bottom circles of the cylinder and save the file. Then select Open File or click the empty texture square and select the map we just have created. To clean up the object, hide the UV map layer in the cylinder map file, save it and reload the texture on the 3D object. Now you can change the height, width and depth as a regular 3D primitive. However, if you want to change the color of the primitive, the gray color background will remain. To fix that, reduce the opacity of the gray in the background color and save the map file again. Then reload the map and change alpha to remove with threshold. Move the slider of the threshold until the object shows again. Then you can select any color that you want. Open primitives can help to visualize shapes that are not so obvious when you use the regular 3D primitives. You can create open or hollow primitives with the cube, sphere, pyramid or prism. You can improve the process using color and numbers in your UV maps. We are going to see how later in this tutorial. You can see all your 3D primitives from the object list. Instead of the subtool detail, you can use the tool property palette to quickly expand and see all the 3D objects in the 3D layer. You can hide and lock primitives. Or make them not able to be selected on the canvas. You can also change the name to organize better your 3D objects. On the canvas, you can press Shift to select one by one primitive at a time. On the object list, you can select multiple near objects with Shift or with Control key when they are not close between each other. You can cut a selected group and paste them at the bottom of the object list. That way, it will be easier to make the selection of the primitives again. You can also duplicate one or multiple objects with one click. In a similar way, you can delete all the selected primitives at once. If you try to rotate multiple objects, by default, they will rotate over their local pivot point. You can change this from pivot point for multiple objects. Select the first option and change the rotation step to 90 degrees. You can always change it back. You can move the group using a snapping to align the objects. Now, you can try the midpoint on multiple objects to place 3D primitives around an object. You can easily create a staircase, roof, and combine different shapes in a symmetrical way. You can copy and paste a 3D object and move it in any axis. If you paste the object again, it would place the primitive leaving the same distance used when you move the pasted object. You can repeat this process as many times as you want, with one or multiple objects. You can also paste and move the 3D primitive in more than just one axis. And with the help of the snapping option, you can create a staircase in literally seconds. You can use colors and numbers in your UV maps to visualize the different areas when you create custom 3D primitives. Go to 3D Primitives texture and click on Export Map and save the map as a Clip Studio file. Open the map and check the image resolution from the Edit menu. You can increase the size if you want to have more space for details. You can use the grid settings to make divisions. Keep in mind that the maximum value for gap is 1000 pixels. Then, you can use Snap to Grid to make and fill selections with different colors. Save the file and select Open File, or click the empty texture square and select the map we just have created. Uncheck Apply Light Source so you can easily visualize the different areas with colors. Then you can proceed to add numbers and divide the map into more sections. You can repeat the process with all the other 3D primitives. You can use 3D primitives to create effects, light, and reflections. First, you need to open the 3D primitive with the UV map applied, with colors and numbers. Uncheck Apply Light Source and cast shadows. Then, identify the planes or faces you are going to use. For this example, the 3 over red and the 4 over purple. Paint or place the light in one side and the reflection in the other. You can also use a dark background to visualize the effect with more contrast. Now, reload the texture and check the position. If everything is correct, hide the layers, leaving only the light and reflection visible. Proceed to save and reload the map. Now, you have a light effect inside a 3D primitive cube. Remember, when alpha is set to semi-transparent, you can also control the opacity of the object. Now, you might find overlapping issues when you place the light into a scene using snapping to 3D models. To fix that, move the object with the arrow to identify the axis with the problem. Then undo, and for the tool property, change 0.1 the value in the position of the axis with the small arrows, in this case the y-axis. You can repeat this process to create doors, windows, or try different effects with other shapes and images. So, I hope you have found some useful tips or hacks in this tutorial. Remember, start customizing your workspace to improve your workflow. create a library of custom primitives, and create your 3D scenes using the different tools we have seen in this tutorial. That's all for this video. This is Ed, saying until the next one.